All right, let's dive into this Tammy Ray case. You guys brought us a true crime podcast episode, and wow, this one is it's got some twists and
It
turns,
really does.
and it really is kind of hits you in the feels a bit too, especially for Tammy's daughter, Haley.
Absolutely.
So we're gonna kind of unpack all this together and see what we can make of it. I mean, just to give you a couple of teasers right up front, we've got a husband possibly framing the boyfriend. We've got a daughter who might have been sleepwalking and committed the crime. And we've even got a digital audio recorder uncovering secrets.
This case offers a really fascinating look at domestic abuse, the complexities of investigations, and yeah, the ripple effect of violence on families.
Okay, so let's set the stage a little bit. We're in Pierre, South Dakota, small town, seemingly quiet Nate's Plant. Tammy and Brad Ray lived a pretty ordinary life with their 12-year-old daughter, Haley.
Yeah, on the surface, they seem like any other family. Brad worked at Walmart. Tammy had a part-time job at Kmart. Haley was in school, played sports, but under the surface, their marriage was really falling apart.
And they were actually on the verge of divorce.
They were, which was a shock to Haley because she didn't know anything about the problems they were having.
Oh, wow.
And then on top of that,
And to make things even more complicated,
Yes.
Tammy started a new relationship with a guy named Brian Clark, who was actually a colleague from Kmart.
yeah, so you've got Tammy in this difficult marriage, with Brad finding comfort in a new relationship with Brian. And then to add to the mix, you've got Brad's twin brother, Brad, who actually becomes pretty important later in the story.
Oh, boy.
So keep those names in mind as we go through all of this.
Okay. So it's February 8th, 2006, when Tammy just vanishes. Her mother, Bonnie, usually talked to her every morning.
Right.
But that day, Tammy's phone went straight to voicemail.
Yeah. And so Bonnie starts to worry. And then she really panics when she finds out that Tammy didn't show up for work, either at Kmart or her new job at a pharmacy. And then the alarm bells really start ringing when Brian, Tammy's new boyfriend, makes a frantic 911 call to report her missing.
So in that call, does he say like what he thinks happened to her?
He does. And this is where things take a dramatic turn. He reveals the affair and suggests that Tammy's husband, Brad, might be involved in her disappearance.
Oh, so right away he's pointing the finger.
Immediately. And that suspicion grows when the police find a lot of blood in Tammy's Durango.
Okay, blood in the Durango, that's concerning. But could that have been from like an accident, or did investigators look at other possibilities?
Well, they couldn't rule out an accident completely, but the amount of blood, it was just too much. It pointed to something much worse. And remember, at this point, nobody knows where Tammy is.
Right.
So the police bring Brad in for questioning, and his story is immediately suspicious.
Okay.
He tells this whole elaborate tale about following Tammy and this supposed boyfriend of hers the night before his car breaking down, and he even says he ran into a highway patrol officer who could back up part of his alibi.
Okay, so was he telling the truth about any of that?
Interestingly enough, the police later confirmed that he was actually telling the truth about the highway patrol officer. But yeah.
Yeah.
But the blood in the Durango and just his whole demeanor, it kept the police suspicious.
Yeah.
So with no body and limited evidence, they arrested Brad for first-degree murder.
Wow, first-degree murder. So that means premeditation, right?
Yeah.
Pretty serious charge.
Exactly. And it carries a heavy penalty.
Yeah.
But they knew they needed more evidence to make the case really solid.
It's like we're walking through a maze already, and we're just getting started
Yeah,
here.
we're just getting started. So the search for Tammy was huge.
Yeah.
Volunteers, canine units, even a National Guard helicopter. But days turned into a week, and still no sign of her. And then on February 9th, there was a grim discovery.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
What happened?
The helicopter pilot, he spotted something in this remote spillway near the auto dam.
Okay.
It was Tani's body.
Oh, wow.
And the scene was just horrific.
So what did they find? What did the crime scene look like?
It was brutal. She had been stabbed multiple times, her throat was slashed, and some of the injuries, they were actually inflicted after she died.
Post-mortem?
Yeah. Suggesting this rage that just went way beyond just ending her life.
Wow, so they have a body, a potential crime scene, but did any of that help investigators get any closer to the truth?
It did, but not in the way you might think. The initial autopsy didn't really reveal any forensic evidence like fingerprints or DNA directly linking either Brad or Brian to the murder.
What exactly does forensic evidence mean?
That's a good question. It refers to scientific evidence that's collected and analyzed to establish facts in a legal case. So things like fingerprints, DNA, that sort of thing. And the absence of that evidence meant that investigators were back to square one. 2 potential suspects, and no clear answers.
Yeah, it's like we're going in circles here. So what was the next big development?
About a month later, a letter arrived at the Attorney General's office. And this is where the case takes a really unexpected turn.
Okay, a letter. What did it say?
It claimed to be from Brian Clark's cousin, and it detailed this chilling confession from Brian about the murder.
Okay.
And what made it even more intriguing was it mentioned a detail that hadn't been released to the public. A used condom that was found inside Tammy's body.
Wait, a detail not public knowledge. Did they try to verify this letter? Did they try to find Brian Clark's cousin?
They did. They tried to verify where the letter came from, but they couldn't conclusively trace it back to Brian's cousin.
Hmm.
But that detail about the condom, it kind of added a layer of credibility to the letter.
Right, right. So had the police missed that during the initial autopsy?
They had. They missed that crucial piece of evidence during the first autopsy. And upon re-examination, they confirmed that it was there.
So is that the breakthrough they needed? Did the DNA from the condom point to Brian?
It didn't, unfortunately.
Yeah.
The DNA on the condom, it was too degraded to provide a conclusive match.
Oh, man.
So while the letter kind of pointed towards Brian's involvement, there still wasn't that concrete proof.
It's like every step forward leads to another dead end. So where did the investigation go from there?
So remember Brad's sitting in jail, seemingly pretty confident that the DNA evidence is going to set him free. Well, the police were about to uncover something that would completely change everything.
Okay.
During another search of Brad's house, they found a digital audio recorder hidden in his dresser drawer.
A digital audio recorder? What was on it? Were they thinking right away that he was involved somehow?
The recorder had a recording of a phone call between Tammy and guess who? Brian Clark.
Really?
Yeah. In the recording, Tammy's professing her love for Brian,
Oh, wow.
which totally contradicts Brad's earlier statements that he had no idea who Tammy was seeing.
Okay.
So finding this recording was a huge turning point in the investigation.
Yeah, I bet.
It showed that Brad had been spying on Tammy, recording her conversations, and basically trying to gather information about her relationship with Brian.
Oh, so he wasn't just like a heartbroken husband. He was actually trying to, do some pretty shady stuff.
Exactly. He wasn't just a heartbroken husband, he was controlling and manipulative.
Right.
And his earlier comment about hoping for DNA evidence to clear him suddenly takes on a whole new meaning.
Right, yeah. It sounds like he was counting on the condom being that smoking gun that pointed the finger at Brian. But with the degraded DNA, he needed a new plan.
You got it. And this is where his twin brother Brett enters the picture.
Another twist? All right, tell me about this brotherly scheme.
So the police, smart move on their part, had been monitoring Brad's calls from jail.
Okay.
And they noticed something odd. Brad asked Brett to bring a notepad during his next visit.
Okay.
They set up a hidden camera, and they saw Brad slipping Brett a piece of paper with instructions on it.
Instructions? Like what kind of instructions?
It turned out to be a draft of the letter that was sent to the Attorney General's office, the one claiming to be from Brian's cousin.
Oh, so they were trying to fake a confession from Brian to try to get Brad off the hook? So what happened next? Did the police let them get away with it?
No, thankfully they were one step ahead. They followed. Brett caught him mailing the letters and arrested him for being an accessory to a felony.
So that means he helped Brad after the crime had already happened.
Exactly. With Brett in custody, the truth started to come out. Under pressure from the evidence, Brett confessed to helping his brother and agreed to testify against Brad.
Wow, that's big. But they still didn't have any physical evidence directly linking Brad to the murder.
Right. They needed that irrefutable link. And it came from a surprising place, another letter.
Another letter, huh?
This one seemed innocent enough. It was a note Brad sent to Brett talking about good fishing spots near the Owa Dam.
Okay, a fishing map. Why would that be suspicious?
He even drew a map with specific locations. The police weren't buying it. With everything else they knew about Brad, the timing and the content of the letter just felt way too coincidental.
Okay, so they decided to investigate those locations on the map?
They did, and their suspicions were confirmed when they searched the area near the Owa Dam power station. Specifically, this cluster of juniper bushes that Brad had marked on his map.
And what did they find hidden in the bushes? Was this the missing piece of the puzzle?
Hidden in those bushes were 3 black garbage bags. Inside, they found blood-soaked bedding. Sheets, blankets, pillowcases, all confirmed to be Tammy's. They also found bloody gloves, women's underwear, and a box of condoms with one missing.
Oh, wow. So this was it, the physical evidence they needed to connect Brad directly to the murder?
Exactly. But there was one more chilling detail. A blood-stained tarp.
A tarp.
Yeah. Investigators think Brad planned this whole thing out very carefully.
Oh, no.
He put the tarp on Tommy's mattress, covered it with sheets so she wouldn't notice, and then attacked her in her sleep.
He attacked her in her sleep. That's awful.
It seemed so. The tarp would have contained all the blood splatter, which explains why there wasn't any blood in the bedroom. Then he wrapped Tommy's body in the bloody bedding, carried her to the garage, loaded her into the Durango, and drove to the spillway.
And that's where he did those extra stab wounds.
It seems like it, yeah.
It's a level of planning and just brutality that's hard to even imagine.
It is, and it's sadly not that uncommon in cases of domestic abuse.
It really is a reminder that we often just don't know what's going on behind closed doors. But, okay, back to the case. So with the physical evidence, the confession from Brett, and a clear motive, it seems like the prosecution finally had everything they needed to put Brad Ray behind bars. It seems like an open and shut case, but this case has been anything but predictable. What happened when it went to trial? With all that evidence against him, I mean, it seems like the trial should have been pretty straightforward. But, like we've seen, Brad Ray, always one step ahead, a master manipulator. So what happened when he was finally brought to court?
But just like you said, he had one last shocking move up his sleeve. Instead of staying quiet, he actually chose to testify, and what he said just stunned everyone in the courtroom.
So he confessed, right. He finally admitted to killing Tammy.
Well, not quite. He admitted to the cover-up, framing Brian, even his brother's involvement. But then in this desperate attempt to shift the blame, he dropped a bombshell. He claimed that his 13-year-old daughter, Haley, had killed Tammy.
He tried to blame his own daughter. I mean, come on, that's unbelievable. What was his explanation? How could he possibly justify that?
He said that he came home late that night and found Haley standing over Tammy's body, covered in blood, holding a knife. And his story was that Haley was sleepwalking and didn't remember any of it. He was basically trying to paint himself as this desperate father trying to protect his troubled child.
Did anyone buy that story? I mean, what was Haley's reaction to being accused of murdering her own mother?
It was a ridiculous claim, especially with how brutal the murder was. The prosecution called Haley to the stand, and she completely denied her father's accusations.
Man, just imagine being Haley, losing your mom, and then being forced to face your dad in court while he's accusing you of murder. The emotional toll that must have taken on her.
It was a heartbreaking scene. Haley stood strong, though, and she bravely told the court how much she loved her mom and how she would never hurt her. She even refuted specific details of Brad's story, proving that he was making it all up.
It really shows her strength and resilience to go through something that traumatic and still be able to stand up for herself and the truth.
Absolutely. It's remarkable.
So the jury saw right through his lies. They didn't believe him about Haley.
No, not at all. The evidence, along with Brad's inconsistent and sometimes really strange testimony, just painted a clear picture. Brad Ray was a manipulative and controlling husband driven by jealousy and rage. He'd planned and carried out this horrible murder, and now he was trying to escape responsibility by blaming his own daughter.
So what happened? What was the verdict?
The jury deliberated for only 3 hours before they came back with a guilty verdict. First-degree murder.
Wow, 3 hours.
Yeah. And Brad was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Justice was served, but at a terrible cost. Haley lost both her parents, and Tammy's family was left to deal with this devastating loss.
It's just heartbreaking. And it makes you wonder what happens to those left behind in these kinds of cases. How do they deal with the grief, the trauma? How do they even begin to heal?
It's a long and difficult process. But Haley's story actually takes a really inspiring turn. She went to live with Tammy's family and found love and support there. And eventually, she dedicated her life to raising awareness about domestic violence.
So she turned her pain into purpose. That's really powerful.
In a TED Talk, Haley talked about how she wanted her life to be a reflection of the person her mother would have wanted her to be. And she said something really powerful: silence will not break the violence.
Wow, that's a really powerful statement.
It is. Her story reminds us that even after the darkest times, hope and healing are possible.
This whole deep dive has been a roller coaster. We've uncovered so much to see. We've seen how devastating domestic violence can be. And ultimately, we've seen the power of resilience and the pursuit of justice. If there's one thing we can take away from Tammy Ray's story, it's the importance of recognizing the signs of abuse and speaking out against it.
Absolutely. This case really shows us that domestic abuse can happen to anyone, anywhere. It's a widespread issue, and it needs our attention. Haley's story shows that we can all do something to break the cycle of violence and help survivors.
Yeah. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic abuse, please reach out for help. There are resources out there. You don't have to go through this alone. We'll put some helpful links in the show notes. And if you want to learn more about Haley's story and her work, you can find her organization In Memory of Tammy Burns Ray on Facebook.
This case is a powerful reminder that behind the headlines and court cases, there are real people whose lives are forever changed by these events. It's a call to action for all of us to be more aware, more compassionate, and more committed to creating a world where these kinds of tragedies don't happen anymore.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Tammy Ray case. It's been a heavy but really important conversation, and we hope this encourages you to think critically about these issues and to learn more. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.